Hallo, herzlich willkommen im Architekturzentrum Wien. Good afternoon, welcome to the Architekturzentrum Wien, the Austrian Architecture Museum. Welcome to the conference Planet Matters, which we are organizing as part of the Vienna Biennale with our partner institutions MAC, Kunsthalle, Kunsthaus, University of Applied Arts and the Vienna Business Agency. The planet we live in and we live with is exhausted. It suffers from the violence of petro-capitalism. The planet needs better care. This conference tries to find and to reflect a new ethic towards the planet and towards all its species. This requires the collaboration of many kinds of knowledge. That's why today and tomorrow we will listen to a manifold range of speakers from the realms of architecture, art, design, the environment, and economics. Planet love and climate care. These are the key concepts of this year's Biennale. And I'm very happy that we can continue the discussions of an ethics of care that Elke Krasny and I began 4 years ago in the realm of the Vienna Biennale with the project Care and Repair, and have continued here at the AZW with the exhibition Critical Care, Architecture for a Broken Planet, an exhibition that has been touring ever since. We are currently preparing the 6th venue. When introducing care into architecture and urbanism, we have specifically drawn on care theories from feminist and political theory. I would like to recall a quote which could also be useful for today's and tomorrow's discussions. Joan Tronto and Bernice Fisher developed the following definition of care in 1991. Quote, "On the most general level, we suggest that caring be viewed as a species activity that includes everything we do to maintain, continue, and repair our world, so that we can live in it as well as possible. That world includes our bodies, ourselves, and our environment, all of which we seek to interweave in a complex, life-sustaining web." End of quote. How can architecture, art, design, and science become part of such a life-sustaining web? That's, for me, one of the key questions for this conference. One of the architects also committed to such a life-sustaining web and to an ethic of coexistence is Tatiana Bilbao. I would like to draw your attention to the exhibition next door in our main exhibition hall. It's featuring her work, the work of her office, Tatiana Bilbao's studio, and her many collaborators. And if you haven't seen this exhibition, please take the chance. But back to our conference. We will start this afternoon with the panel Eat Love, and we'll then head for 2 wonderful keynotes, 2 speakers in the evening, which are the architect Anna Heringer and the geographer and the environmental social scientist Holly Jean Buck. Tomorrow, we will continue with the panel Circular Society in the morning and 2 more panels in the afternoon, the first one on land matters and the second on natural technology. Each of these panels is interdisciplinary in nature and was jointly conceived by curators from different disciplines. And each panel tries to reach out for a local planetary interconnectedness. I'm very happy that this cross-institutional collaboration has worked out so well, especially all under very difficult pandemic conditions. I would like to thank all the partnering institutions and their directors and curators for their openness, and Christoph for initiating the Vienna Biennale and holding it together. A special thanks goes to the organizers and coordinators of this conference, Astrid Böchacker from the MAC and Caroline Meyer from the Architekturzentrum, who is in fact also one of the curators chairing the Land Matters panel tomorrow, which also connects to another exhibition of ours, The Land for Us All, which is also now touring for the next 2 years. And of course, a big thanks to the whole team here at the museum, as well as to all the supporters and sponsors, especially the Federal Ministry for Climate Action. Most of all, I would like to thank our distinguished speakers and chairs, many of them with us in Vienna today. Some could not travel due to pandemics or due to the train strike in Germany or simply out of ecological reasons. That's why we will hold the conference in a hybrid format, also including a live stream for all those who could not come to the Architekturzentrum. I wish all of you at home in front of the monitors and here at the AZW a really exciting conference. Thank you.
A warm welcome also from my side, and thank you, Angelika, for your kind words, and to the Architekturzentrum for its hospitality again, as 2 years ago. It's great to be here, and thank you all for attending here at the location or online. And I was also to echo the thanks that were expressed with regard to the speakers present or online, but also to the artists, architects, designers, lots of other creative people, and experts and other people from other disciplines for participating with exhibitions in this Vienna Biennale for Change. I lived 8 years in New York, and the images I saw yesterday, the last couple of hours from New York, are really terrifying. They reminded me of a book I recently read by Kim Stanley Robinson. The book is maybe 5, 6 years old. It's called 2140, New York. And it's really New York City with 15 meters permanent level, 50 meters higher sea level than it has now. So you can imagine how life is being experienced in such a city. And when I heard the mayor of New York saying, now we really have to do something, it reminded me of many politicians saying, we really have to do something, after this summer especially, but I still miss the action. So we have to work all very hard on growing a new mindset, and not in a very kind of long-term way, but quickly. And we have to, and this is one of the big problems, short-term thinking in our world. So the question is, as the subtitle of a famous book is also, how to think long-term in a short-term world. And I would even add how to think and act long-term in a short-term world. Kim Stanley Robinson, by the way, is the author also of a new book that's called The Ministry for the Future. It's very exciting because there is a new kind of entity, an international organization administering the Paris Agreement, which is highly necessary, and COP26 is waiting in the wings in early November. But he's also the filmmaker of an excellent film we showcase. You also find it online in the climate care exhibition at the MAC. And it's called Think Yourself as the Planet. And it's really what it's all about. Angelika mentioned already planet love, climate care. These are key words of this Biennale. I would also add circular thinking, because without circular thinking, we won't be able to sustain any growth at all in the medium and longer term, maybe even in the short term. So we have to build this new mindset. This is key. And to do that, we need excellent exhibitions, other creative projects that talk to us in different ways than science would talk to us. Yeah? And this is one of the basic ideas of this current fourth Vienna Biennale. Angelika, you mentioned also care. Care is really, really important. One of the slogans in the climate care exhibition is from smart to care. It doesn't mean that there is no smart anymore. Of course, we need smart cities, smart homes, smart rural landscapes, and so on. But we even need care much more, and we have to combine the two to the extent possible with the best results possible. So this is really what it's all about. I'm also looking forward, as head of the Vienna Biennale for Change, to exciting debates, to thorough analysis, critical assessments, and also a lot of optimism on how we can change the world. In this sense, thank you very much again for your interest, and let's work together on a much better future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you also from my side. Thank you, Angelika Fitz, for having us. Caroline Meyer for not only organizing the conference, but also our panel together with Astrid Böhacker and Alice Jakobas. And thank you, Christoph Thun-Hohenstein, not only for being a great partner in our project, the think tank mobile station, but also for initiating the Biennale and ever since and forever. Very welcome to our speakers of today, Antonio Scarponi, Armando Silva, Katharina Unger, Momoyo Kajima, Maciej Kmara, and Els Verbakel. So great you join us for this afternoon, which is dedicated to Eat Love. Eat Love meaning the exploration of the future of food, the exploration of future food spaces, and what and how they tackle the climate crisis. It is common knowledge that we will be 10 billion by 2050. 2/3 of us will live in cities, and we as humans are the biggest factor in affecting the Earth's geology. Food has a major impact on not only our future, the future of humanity, but on the planet as a whole. One of the big questions we will have to answer is how will we be able to produce a greater amount of food, sustainable and locally, and therefore reduce the strain on our environment. As one of the main causes, food industry, from production, distribution, and also consumption, has to change and will change radically. I think for many people, the pandemic brought a new emphasis on food. In Austria, for example, the sales numbers for organic foods increased sharply, as did the awareness for sustainable and local produced goods. And since food was the last realm during the lockdown where we could shape our lives and where we could design our lives with design, also the cultural importance of food was underlined. We shape our lives with food, and food literally shapes us. So food is also design, and where best explored than in the Biennale for Change, interdisciplinary Biennale that includes all creative sectors from architecture to design and the art. Exactly this lens of creativity led us through the city with the Studio Mobil, a concept created by Hubert Klumpner and Michael Walczak. We traveled with the Studio Mobil, the city of Vienna, and tried to explore new forms of food production, food distribution, and food consumption. Numerous partners from all over the world, from Medellin to Sarajevo, Berlin, Zurich, and of course also Vienna, explored, researched, and developed new forms of food urbanism. Today, the think tank makes its halt at the Platz der Menschenrechte, right around the corner. After this long afternoon of talks, we will be very happy to welcome you there to talk further and meet. Many of the creative minds, many of the progressive minds that were part of the project will now talk about their research and learnings and focus on 3 topics like new forms of mobility of food, new forms of nutrition, and also new forms in our behavior. Behavior, I think, is also a key word for Sonja Stummerer and Martin Habelsreiter, known as Honey and Bunny. Our hosts of today, Honey and Bunny, is a design duo, an art performing duo shown in numerous exhibitions worldwide, performing and lecturing all over Europe, and focusing on the topic of food as a cultural and its cultural aspects and sustainable aspects. Two main publications, Food Design X Large and Eat Design, showed how food is important for our cultural and economic life. I often think that even climate change is real. We don't know how to acknowledge this until maybe it's too late. And I think we need pictures and scenarios that show us what climate change really means. And I think that's the strength of Honey and Bunny. So I hand over here, and I wish you all a great conference, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. A very warm welcome to the first panel this afternoon, Eat Love. We prepared a few videos and some slides for the beginning, just to jump into the topic, and I think we just start right away.
Yeah, also from my side, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Elisabeth. Thank you very much, Christoph and Mrs. Fitz. Thanks a lot for having us today. Okay.
Can we dim the lights maybe a little bit?
Oh.
Food is a political issue. What we eat has a direct impact on the biosphere, on the biodiversity, and on social conditions of people working in the food chain.
The production of food contributes to climate change, the extinction of species, the pollution and destruction of living spaces, as well as the neglect of human and labor rights.
The production of food uses the lion's share of natural resources. Agriculture is responsible for 70% of the fresh water consumption worldwide and of 30% of the CO2 emissions. And around 50% of the world's land surface is covered or used by agriculture. And finally, in Europe, up to 40% of food is thrown away.
Today, the majority of food we eat is produced outside of the region we live, often outside the country, even overseas. That does not only result in longer transportation routes, but also in social inequality, like inadequate payment, dependencies, or even child labor. Farmers earn significantly less than employees in all other jobs, 40% less in Europe, just in Europe. Without funding, they cannot survive economically.
As a product, food in the Western consumer society is produced with a view to making it as efficient, cheap, durable, hygienic, and uniform in quality as possible, such that it meets the requirements of our modern industrial society. Edible goods thus come up against two value systems that are often contradictory. Food is a part of nature and its living creatures on one hand, and food is a mass-produced commodity with a specific monetary value on the other hand.
The way in which we eat is not hardwired into our biology, not at all, but culturally acquired. In every society, the natural compulsion to eat is constrained by a rigid system of conventions and rules that specify exactly how food should be consumed.
So the question is, what is the future? What is the future of food culture? And how can designers and architects contribute? How can we make food sustainable, not only ecologically, but also socially?
For our humble opinion, we as architects, we as designers, we need to change our goals. We need to ask different questions. We need to make problems, so we don't need to solve problems, we need to make them. We need to describe problems and find solutions then. Last week somebody told us that we have too many solutions and not enough problems figured out in the world of design and architecture. But anyhow, what you can see here is a video which we have done at the Viktor Adler Markt. It's one of the main markets in Vienna, and it was part of the project Studio Mobil by Hubert Klumpner and Michael Walczak, from the Urban Think Tank. I think we need to discuss circular economy, as Christoph mentioned already today. We need to discuss a new economical impact system. We need to create ideas and goals for a new way of sustainability. So we don't need to discuss anything about digital futures or something like that. We have to rethink, what are our goals? What do we want to think about? But I think we are just the moderators, and the Studio Mobil at the Viktor Adler Markt, at the Nash Markt, and in front of the MAC was not our idea. So we should ask the very experts which are here with us today and for this afternoon, which are actually way more chairs and hosts than we are. So please welcome Hubert Klumpner and Michael Walczak from Zurich. We are very proud to have them. Thank you very much.
Is this the right one?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, where do we start? I should say, and despite the very strict instructions we got about time, I should say thank you. Thank you to Christoph, who already had to leave, but we'll come back. Thank you to Angelika to host us here in Vienna at the Architekturzentrum. And obviously, thank you. I stay with the people in the room. Thank you to Elisabeth Neuwer-Ginter and also to Alice from the Vienna Business Agency. And I extend those thanks to the MAC and to our team. Michael Walczak here with me on the podium, but also down here, Alejandro Jaramillo and Anna Heringer, and who is coming soon, who we visited typically, and Anne Graupner, who already arrived, who is already here. Great, thank you. And our contribution here extends beyond this Studio Mobil. You already heard a little bit about it, and we will fill our presentation with more details, but we had here actually two roles. On the one hand side, curating the architecture and urban design part in the MAC. I invite you also to see that part of the Biennale. But today and here in the AZW, we will concentrate on the Studio Mobil, and we get right into it, breaking actually the space of discourse and the walls of the museum, taking it to the streets. So let's have a little look here. Okay, so much for that. We actually here with a sort of a wake-up call for all of you. This is an image we took when we worked in Athens a couple of years ago already during the economic crisis, but I think the picture is as valid now as it was then. And we're calling out, along with the people who are also in the exhibition and in this block here with us, I see Antonio and Els Verbakel waiting in Tel Aviv, along with Armando in Bogota, Momoyo here being in the room, and a lot of other people. Because, as we all know, let's rehearse for a moment the challenges. The situation is actually serious. And I also like to say this because we had our minister, Mrs. Gewessler, actually at the opening. Our Minister for Climate Action, it requires urgent action. And I think in Austria we are here not on the margin, but in the center of what is happening. Because while we're talking about food and architecture and urbanism, at the end of the day we're talking about people. And we just listed here a short version of what the challenges actually are. And we like to point out that the crisis, also that Angelika talked about, the crisis this stressed world is in, is man-made. Let's not forget about that. It's not a natural phenomenon. The crisis is man-made. And I like to figure out, I don't know exactly where you spent your summer, but our team, we were actually between Austria, Vienna, we already heard it, also passing by Hallein. This is a picture that I took myself there. And Colombia, and I like to use Colombia here as a reference, not only because we have a lot of Colombians in our team and we're working there, and our office, our Medellin office is there, but because you will see later also that we're connecting the example of the city of Vienna, where we are, also to the archive of the projects that we're showing in the exhibition, and what could be better than being aware also, along with the problems that we have here, that suddenly are the same than are elsewhere. When we started to work here in Europe, a lot of people asked us what do we have to do with these topics that I just showed you earlier here in Austria. I think by now the climate crisis and also the COVID crisis actually put us on the same level. We have to change the same challenges. And the picture on the left, a Spanish journalist said actually in her line that she can't believe that the images from North Rhine-Westphalia and Austria suddenly look like in a developing country. People are very slow in reacting. They're not prepared. We are unprepared to this crisis, and we should actually look also at the conflicts. I liked very much what Martin and Sonja said earlier, and you described it with the word problems. It is also that we're out of our comfort zone. I think it is time to realize that, and we have actually decided to go out. We have been working in those Herkunftsländer, in these places of origin, as you all know. But I like to bring this work also in the frame of what we did here in Vienna over the last months since the opening of the Biennale at the end of May, because we believe that this analysis, the creation of hypotheses, and what we do best, prototyping, is exactly what we have to do now, and very quick. There's no waiting, there's no mid-term or slow-term action, and I just give you 2 or 3 points that, to my mind, are very relevant to architecture, urban design, and food. If we want to reach the climate goals that are actually written up by this government, and if we look where we stand now, we should actually already now not license a single car with a combustion engine, because by 2035, we should not have any cars with a combustion engine, fossil driven. But now we have 95%. And everybody knows if you buy a car, a truck that transports our food, there's almost no truck outside on the street today which is not running with diesel. There are 2% which are not running with diesel. So those are the trucks that transport your milk, your avocados from the port of Rotterdam and so forth. And if we go further into the subject matter, we could say the same about cement, about the construction materials that build the supermarkets and the places around. And if we want to scale up another agriculture, then we are not late, we are actually already too late. And it requires, to our mind, something that we would like to cast from our point of view, and this was this project about, in something that we are doing. It has more to do with contemporary art, with activity and concrete action on the street. And we decided that we not only need for this analysis a new design, that we have to design the methods. So we're not only using methods, but we have to design the methods, and we have to design the tools that we are working and using for this dialogue out in the street, out of the museum, out of the offices, out of the architecture center, out of the places where you normally spend 90% of your time indoors, that we have to take it actually to the streets, which was obviously not a coincidence, but it was forced on us also by Corona, and that we have to design these tools. And I just show you a few here. This is an installation that we developed and built about a work with June and the News from Nowhere in the Löwenbräu Gallery in Zurich. And we thought that this sort of rickshaw, which is not only a means of transport, an alternative man-driven transport, but also this agora is something the street needs. So we actually took this opportunity, thanks to the Wirtschaftsagentur, to develop these tools further. And I show another example about materiality and what we inspired by. We think when we're out on the street, picture on the bottom left, you see actually people dining on a table that in a collaboration with Martin Rauch, these objects here from Martin Rauch, and we designed this sort of roof and light because we thought when we're out on the street, we need new places. Where do people eat? Where do they sit? They need roofs and light. They need intergenerational areas. And this was the invitation from the city of Barcelona to design a playground, which we did, a playground for all generations, 24 hours built out of recycled materials. Some of them, you will see some sails here, and obviously this sort of soil, compacted soil, something that we also brought in the exhibition, a frame of people that we know. But as always, we were interested in the street also as a resource of improvisation, informal improvisation, powerful structures under the radar of government rules. How else would somebody be able to sell food on a parking lot that is actually planned for standing traffic, transported and hacked by people who use this actually as food mobiles? You all know those structures, but we thought that those are actually powerful statements that we all see in the streets and that work actually, as we learned, if we want to set up the Studio Mobil in Vienna, you need licenses from the Bezirksbehörde, from the Marktamt, from the police. They're overlapping licenses and ownerships, and you also have to think in process. So we think that the people who work with these vehicles, which are actually not able to move anymore, they have a sense for that, and we should bring that in the frame also to what we called the Studio Mobil. There's obviously, this is obviously a wolf in the sheep's skin, and you will see it outside. So there's something underneath this skin. And I send my particular thanks here not only to Anne Graupner once again, but also to Andreas Seidel, because we developed this cover, I should say it, or the Studio Mobil, to get out of recycled sails from the Mediterranean, with Seidel sails in Salzburg. So thanks to Andrea at this point as well. Then we also worked, Alejandro here in the audience worked a lot on how to put this element actually in the street. A lot of setups. How can we actually take something which is intrinsically mobile, just like a food truck, you all know them, driving sausage stands, etc., and bring actually a device, a platform out in the street, a device that is not only transporting the content from the museum outside in the street, but is also as a workshop, but also as a TV studio, bringing the content from the street back in the museum. And this is exactly what we are trying to do with the Studio Mobil, and we're obviously picking up on the culture the Viennese people like to eat on the street. Who had his last, who hadn't his last visit at a sausage stand or sits outside in a street cafe? And that brings us exactly into the frame of what we have been looking at. Because what we're doing in this exhibition, and I show you some for all the people who haven't seen it yet, please go in the MAC. It's there until the 3rd and 4th of October. We presented actually an archive of projects like-minded, which we tried as an idea of creating actually a theory, a thesis, that we wanted to bring in a frame also for you, for all of you who are architects and designers, to actually hold on to. An archive where we put some order in, an archive that we presented, not ideas that haven't been made, but we were actually focusing on concrete projects that are either in the making or that are already done. And what I'm showing you here, and Michael will come back to that in a moment, are the corredores verdes, the climate corridors in Medellin. But we also looked, for instance, at a project here from our colleague from the ETH, Anne Lacaton, with her students, and Ursula Biemann, an artist from Zurich. We looked at a decentral indigenous university in the Colombian rainforest. So I stay with my example of Colombia. Why? Because we learn today from indigenous people not only about pharmaceutical plants, but we also learn what to eat in the jungle. So the infrastructure in the jungle of a university, which is basically not a building anymore, is for us also an inspiration how to deal with a green corridor that could cut through Vienna, that could teach us how to overcome the limitations of what we call in our governance and policy papers forests and agriculture land versus urbanized land. I think we have to really think, just like the people of their food mobiles, about those political entities and also about overcoming them. Okay, And then we brought this whole topic into the frame of the exhibition, and I pass over to Michael for that.
Yes, thank you very much. So like Hubert mentioned, the idea of Studio Mobil is that we are projecting also back into the museum. So we are harvesting ideas out in the city and bring it back to the museum to make it accessible to the people. And we are using also blockchain technology, for example, to make exactly that link, that digital link between our mobile vehicle back into the museum on a distributed network, which we are using here. So, and the interesting thing is that with the Studio Mobil, we had, for example, the chance to engage with the city on 15 days, 24/7. The whole night we were experiencing the city in 5 different locations. So on the edges also of the city, so not to be in the center in the first district, but to see what is happening actually around in the city, to go into these districts, to talk to the people on the site, to talk to the local farmers, to talk to the local market. And that engaged us also with 10 different workshops, for example, where we, together with the Vienna Business Agency, we had the opportunity to create the challenge platform, where we, for example, had Anastasia Eggers or Otto von Röder joining the Studio Mobil as a plugin, so being invited at this platform to, for example, their project called the Viennese Caviar Goes Vegan, where their initiative was going to the old Danube and harvesting water plants and bringing them to the Studio Mobil, drying them, producing caviar, and then celebrating that moment all together with the local audience and eating that caviar. Or, for example, Cucina Alchimia, who with asparagus developed paper on site in front of the MAC, which we then were using as an art medium to draw on it, and then at the very end to even eat it and consume it. And Studio Mobil, we had the chance to engage with 20 different partners here from Vienna to open up the discourse, to open up this platform for engaging with the city. And we had up to 100 different visitors coming here from Vienna, from the local initiatives. And we were recording also all of that, what was being said and being exchanged on an archive. So we were able to exactly to bridge the gap between also quantitative and qualitative data collection, which I also come back in a second. And on the same spot here on the Naschmarkt location, where we also invited our team from the Medellin office to what Hubert just mentioned before about the climate corridors which was initiated also by the Ashton Climate Fund. So to bring also a project from the exhibition, to bring the people from Medellin down to the street on the Naschmarkt, and then to see how such an initiative could actually also be applied to the local context of Vienna. So what we, for example, found is that corridor of the Naschmarkt, so we were registering actually in a section typology, and we actually realized that those models which we are using as architects and planners, those conventional models are actually not enough anymore, because, for example, the component of time and the component of motion is completely neglected in such aesthetics. So that's why the Studio Mobil, like I mentioned, is on the one hand side the qualitative data collection which we are registering in our archive, but also the quantitative. So Studio Mobil can also measure the climatic conditions in its location. Like, for example, we see here in the city of Sarajevo, where we are just after the Platz der Menschenrechte event. We will be going to Sarajevo, where we are also working on a new urban plan, also transferring lessons learned from Vienna to Sarajevo, but also back from Sarajevo to Vienna. So exactly that interface between quantitative and qualitative is where we are interested in. And that is actually useful for us because we can then do different digital simulations. We're using artificial intelligence, for example, to use exactly those data and to simulate, for example, the flow of food in the city. Where is the food coming from? Where is it going? Where is it produced? Where is it consumed? And, for example, also initiatives like the EOS cargo bike, which is also part of the exhibition, we can bring in such initiatives here, but then also make it communicable. So, for example, through virtual or mixed realities, we can experience such scenarios, such imaginations, such digital urban imaginations, which were harvested locally in the city, but then also to make decisions of, for example, to support also the sustainable development goals and to generate an index for policy and dialogue governance. And here I give it back to Hubert. Yes, and maybe as a last word, we are all inviting you after this fascinating conference here, so around 8 o'clock, to join us at the Studio Mobil, where we will be opening and presenting the Studio Mobil at the Platz der Menschenrechte. And thank you very much for listening, and looking forward to the further conference.
Thank you very much, Michael and Hubert from Urban Think Tank Next. Now we're getting a little more...
Sorry for interrupting them. It's not actually our idea, but somebody told us that we have to do a strict...
Yeah, because of the online audience, we have to be really strict about the time schedule. Now we're getting a little more intellectual.
Even more intellectual. It's almost unthinkable, I would say. And I mean, whenever do you have the chance to hear somebody who talked to Jacques Derrida, to Umberto Eco, and to intellectuals like them? Now you have the chance. Please welcome Professor Armando Silva from Bogota in Colombia,
who will join us online.
Hello, Armando, can you hear me? Hello? Armando, can you hear me? We are ready now for your presentation. Habe ich schon.
Er ist schon drin.
Er hat sein Video ausgeschalten.
Hello, good morning.
Hello, welcome. We're ready for your presentation. Hello.
Okay, John, I was waiting for you.
You have been introduced already. Now I just let you enter the meeting and feel welcome to share your screen.
Yeah.
Wait a second, I think I need to...
Let me see, I want to control time.
Okay.
20 minutes, okay?
20 minutes. And you can...
Excuse me?
You can get going.
Okay. Okay. Okay, good morning to... good afternoon to everyone here present. I want to thank first to the Vienna Biennale, to his director, Christoph Tom Hofstein, to architect from the Zurich University, ETH, and to Angelica Fitz and everyone in the team of this work. Okay, today I have my 20 minutes presentation about urban imaginaries and the imagined city. I had some slides I'm going to show you. And I prepared my conference in PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to share the screen with Caroline. Okay, here. Okay, I think it's okay now. Caroline, do you see that presentation?
Yes, we can see the presentation. You have to press the same button like you did yesterday in the chat.
Yeah. But I don't like all full screen, but you know, let me see here.
This one.
Okay.
No, it's on at the bottom. Is correct. You were
correct.
Yeah. Lower. Yeah. Now a bit to the right.
Yeah.
Here, this one. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that
I'm
okay
here.
for you? Okay.
Yeah, it's okay for me. Okay, so you know the title is Urban Imaginaries and the Imagined City. The panel, of course, is 8 hours. You know, I showed this first photo, this image from my own house to show the, you know, the destruction of the image from the, and you are seeking in the imagined city relate to the real city. Okay, I'm going to explain what means the imagined city. So I express here how can I see the real city. Always is an amazing problem because if you look from the imagined city, that real city is a strange city. Because the real is not the reality, so it's very important in my point of view. The reality is a ghost of the real, not the reality. So in that way, we are working in this approach, urban imaginary with urban ghost. I prefer to express myself in 9 statements from the standard urban imaginaries. This concept was born from my book of the same name 20 years ago, and from which the international project of imagined cities was born. Today we have more than 100 cities in the world that are following this kind of approach. The first is the imagined city. What is that? The imagined city introduced the concept of citizen urbanism. That means that the studies of urban imaginaries are not of the city, but of the urban. But the urban is not the architectural, but the citizen. So we study how citizens perceive the world from their perception, what we call citizen urbanism. This is the first principle and principal concept for my approach to urban imaginaries, the citizen urbanism. The other side is that of the architectural urbanism, because this one, citizen urbanists, are coming from the people, from the inhabitants. So if we see that imaginaries are, or the imagined city are invisible and is mental, but they not only mental because she becomes a body through social action that I call incarnation. So this is why I wrote in the title, Becoming a Body. If I take a photo of a building full of bars, it's not a photo of our building, but of fear. So visually, physically, it's a kind of building, but inside of urban imaginaries is a picture of fear. Imaginaries and perception. I like to made the difference in between. Imaginaries are invisible. What we see when we see any kind of image is perception. So it's different between perception and imaginaries. Some people put together, but it's not right. This way is not a sociological approach, but on the ways in which community conceive the world. This representation corresponds to social phantoms that not necessarily have correspondence with objective reality. That is very important point, that the reality, physical reality, necessarily has no coincidence with the imagined city. Because I told you before, we are working more in the idea of urban ghosts that are invisible. But the imaginaries inhabit the minds of citizens and can come to dominate reality until they turn the imagine into reality. That is the mysterious of this approach, that how, because people have a particular perception of the world, this perception, even if not the same of the reality, the objective reality, could be dominant. And when that happens, we are in the imagined world. Some circumstances, like pandemic today, or different others that are in the frontier of the feelings, are part of the very strong archive of the urban imaginaries. The imaginaries, because some people ask me if it's the same thing as ideology. So ideology is quite different to imaginaries. Ideology since Marx, the classic study, economic study by Marx, means a false consciousness. Imaginaries, in the other hand, is how the world is known and then represented to not only from knowledge, but from feelings and affections. That means that the imaginaries approach is part of knowledge, but at the same time, part of our feelings and affections. In fact, the imaginaries are a sentimental approach to the world. Imaginary is a public space. We see then the imagined city, the imagined reality as a structural part of the public space. I want to emphasize this point. So the imaginary sensation becomes part of the public space. That means that this kind of approach is coming from philosophy, from Kant and another tradition, aesthetic tradition, and that we understand in this philosophical tradition that the world is not only adjustment, but feelings and sensation. So the real city exists. This is a principle of our understanding. The real city exists because it's imagined. Pay attention to this. The real exists because it's imagined. That is the evolution, we can say, of this kind of subjective approach. And then the imagine and future. Imaginaries and future. The time of the imaginaries is the future. They do not live in allogocentric logic, as I said before, but on aesthetic. It's not the word, but the image. And dreams. It's very familiar to the dreams. I'm going to show you at the end of this presentation. It's a dream, but awake. We found this cartel that expressed my idea, the in French, the réalité dans n'existe pas. Where is the imagined city with all this consideration I have been talking about? A case of the imagine of a smell. I want to share with you this example from my research in Mexico, DF, Calle Hidalgo de Mexico. You know, it sees a bad smell, but disappear because they channel the same, you know, all the bad water. They fix the black water. But after 20 years, it continued to exist in public memory. I mean, the smell. And people feel the smell, even it doesn't exist in the reality. So they put in this street de Hidalgo, Mexico, the sculpture by Sebastian. Maybe you have going to Mexico, you can remember the yellow horse to the bird perceptions. That they changed the bad smell for a beautiful sculpture. The same goes for the Anchor Bread factory in Vienna. As I have been talking with our team in Vienna. This factory doesn't exist anymore. Many years disappeared, but the smell, still the smell. This is memory and at the same time future. This is why I expressed myself before, how the time of the imaginaries are the future. Imaginaries and action. Imaginary study can contribute to the understanding of the city. Can they intervene? This is my idea now with my Vienna team. How? Because I used to have a kind of research, more than philosophical way. And now we are working in the idea of the action, very much in this idea. How we can become an action so they can use and understand for public institutions to make different planification of the future. Here we go closer to public art. And in fact, we use tools coming today from the public art. Contemporary art and imaginaries. The encounter with art proposed by the Vienna Biennale 2021 is a very important opportunity to deep this relation with public art and urban imaginary. Let me tell you that I was invited to document 11 with great contribution in this document by Okwi, the curator. But today, this Vienna Biennale for change, definitely in my way of understanding, breaks with the idea of museum. Why? Because the idea of museum is still in that document 11. Now with this document in Vienna is not more. Because the art and the presentation is coming from outside. In the city itself, or in research, or science, where art occur or happen. That is a big break from the art tradition. The last point, urban archives, imaginary spots. I was working my dissertation thesis with Professor Jacques Derrida. So I work with the idea of archives that is very familiar for this thinker. I put the idea of archives in different ways, but I want to express myself today in two specific objects of urban archives. First, the family photo album originate in privacy and graffiti dominating the public space. When I had a presentation, or I got an invitation from in Barcelona, they present my imaginary theory in three kinds of archives. The private archive, that means the one is coming from the private world, like family photo album. The community archive, that is coming from the community, like graffiti, and the public archive that is coming from the cities, you know, the way we perceive the cities. So from these three of archives, I'm going to talk about the first two, the family photo album and the graffiti, as a part of my own methodology. The family photo album represent a very important part of my visual work. And let me tell you that the first time this kind of domestic visual art studied. It's incredible. When I was talking with Derrida, and we found together that doesn't exist any other research before about the family photo album. You know, many things happen, but the reality is that doesn't exist until that day that we took in consideration this domestic archive that maybe for the people are very superficial and not important, but for us was very important and became a very fundamental part of my theory of the imaginaries. Let's see here the baby footprint that we can find in this kind of analogic archive, of course. And then the body waste, all these pieces of hair, nails, evacuation organs. You know, that remember me, Lacan's body residue, that for Lacan is the origin of desire. And we talk about imaginaries as a conception of collective desires. So I discovered this origin of desire in the private archives, the family photo album. Let's see how cut of the boyfriend's head, like you see in the left, or sacrifice, or as a kind of sacrifice, or rip a face as in the second one. So all these vengative intentions you can find out when you are studying this kind of very important document. Let me express myself in very little examples of the graffiti. Bruno Giovannetti in San Paulo produced graffiti upon another graffiti, and this is part how graffiti became more a kind of public art, because not only the idea of graffiti, like test of the protest or ideological test, but creation with the picture, Giovannetti create a new graffiti, but as a part of a public art. You know, in the beginning was this little assassin girl, you know, deeper, and here in the upside, this person on the street. So they found this image and they took the picture. That means another kind of graffiti, open another graffiti. So graffiti is not only graffiti, it's a kind of experience of life when you are starting in a very small corner, you know, very, digamos, we can say very small part of the city, but can become dominant. And not only the graffiti, could be part of the architecture way of express yourself, like this one here in Vienna. The Vienna architect Underweiser, you know very well because you are in Vienna, makes a house like graffiti. At the beginning, it's rejected because it's a kind of strange figure, but for the people in this community. But today, it is recognized as an icon. So a new imaginary emerged from the urban woods and emerged from the idea of graffiti of the margin, because graffiti on the beginning is on the margin. It's in the center of the ideas, is not a graffiti. Imagine cases now, I'm going to finish with imagine cases of imaginaries high production. I'm going to show you some examples from a city like Vienna and one from the situation like pandemic. I use pandemic because pandemic was a very big factory of new imaginaries. Yeah, so this is why I use the pandemic to show my ideas of this approach. and Vienna, because now I am working with the team of architect Hubert Kompler, working with different European cities. Are we moving toward to search the radical imaginary? This is the idea that we have now, a radical imaginary. We use this term from the director of Biennale, Christoph von Holsten, whom I thank for his inspiration. Thank you very much. It corresponds to our evolution toward the step from research to intervention. So radical means is understood as the emergence of a social force that transforms a place, a site, of an object, a history, to increase the democracy and the common good. This is the radical conception. The Urban Imaginaries project is associated with the project I am director of. We associate with the urban think tanks for the study of various European cities. Love is the motto of a mobile studio. It is a grand contribution from these people in think tank and University of Zurich. Think tank station with rounds, no? In this case, it's the first time that we use this technique. They go around the Vienna, and it's addressed to issue of food and the food culture of tomorrow, exploring new ways of producing, distributing, and consuming food as a means of tackling the climate crisis. We look for the emblems, very important idea of my work, of the margin to examine the tension between imaginaries. So we see this very good example. The 10th district of Vienna is very popular, inhabited by Syrians, Egyptians, Turkish, Serbs, migrants who do not speak German, but today are a very important part of the new urbanism. This is a kind of radical imaginary as what I was trying to explain to you. And here is the, I have this question for the Vienna Biennale now. Does food become plan of art, or how this food become problem of art, or the food became part of the art? We thought with these last pictures inside of the problem we had with the pandemic. I have been studying the archives in pandemic from the media, and we found statistically that the painting that the people use most is this from Magritte, especially this picture, this painting, The Son of Man. That means that the surrealism is a way of approaching the pandemic. That is, we can understand that, why people think that this pandemic is very surrealistic, and that way they use this kind of figures.
Armando, sorry. I'm one of the chairs here. I'm Martin from Honey and Bunny. I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but may I kindly ask you to come to an end, because we have a very strict time frame here. Yeah,
this is really the end. Okay.
Thank you.
And here, let me explain you this maybe tomorrow. This emblem of the toilet paper. We found this gun is imaginary all over the world practically. That they use more the idea of toilet paper than food. And at the end, the most radical imaginary of the future is that the new normality is an empty imaginary. The pandemic was already put the future in the present. So this is the last one. Grows. That means that it's time for the imaginaries of radical change. In this case, I finish with this word that love as a hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope we can welcome you again for the Q&A a little bit later.
Thank you very much, Armando Silva. Now let's go back to food and food markets.
I don't think we need to go back physically to food markets because we have a very expert, again online, on markets, food markets, and redesigning urban places for food, for eat love. Please welcome Els Verbakel, right from Tel Aviv.
Thank you.
Hi, hello.
Hello. Hello, Els, we can see you. Can you hear us?
Hold on a second. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly well.
Great.
So you've been introduced. Feel free to share your presentation and start.
Great.
You can. I think so.
Can you all see the presentation?
We can see a black slide now. Yeah, now we can see it. It's fine. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. So, hello everyone, and thank you very much to the conference organizers and to Hubert for inviting me and my office to be exhibiting at the exhibition at the Biennale and as well take part of the conference. I'm sorry I can't be there physically, but I'm following on YouTube, so it feels a little bit like being there. So I'm going to present to you our work that is also exhibited at the exhibition, which is on the city of Lod in Israel. And the city of Lod has been a city in evolution, demolition, and reconstruction since its first appearance in Egyptian records 3,500 years ago. So a very long time. Okay, sorry, I'm going to do that without sound. It's a trade junction between the spice and silk routes of the ancient world. And until today, the city operates as a junction between a global network hosting Israel's international airport, regional and local networks holding the famous local market. And its multi-layered history and geography have turned the city into a compilation of overlapping and sometimes incongruent urban fabrics, cultures, and landscapes. So you see here some of the images of the city, the way we found it, and also some of our projects like this one, which are under construction as we speak. Looking at the city's spatial history of growth, demolition, and resurrection, the old city of Lod today is a patchwork of social housing projects surrounded by ruins of the Ottoman city. So here you see some of this destroyed fabric and the ruins that still exist. And basically what we did first, we did that with students from Israel and from Belgium, but then also later on by our office, we went into an in-depth spatial mapping and community surveys that looked at how Lod's communities perceive their own city and address their fears and their hopes. And we developed a master plan that tied together existing and future layers of the city. So we interviewed 150 inhabitants in both Hebrew and in Arabic, and then drew these maps that created a series of elements that form to our understanding, Lod's urban code, which was then used to create new spatial hybrids and combinatory variations for each distinct area. We tried to learn from past urban layers that had already disappeared, but still exist in the collective memory. And we chose to strengthen each layer and allow for them to connect and to coexist. So we started by looking at the actual old city of Lod and its former representation as first the Ottoman city, then the British mandatory additional grid, which then turned into an assortment of disconnected ruins and pieces of different orders that were replaced by a modernist city. And here you see I'm placing this rectangle to show you the exact same scale today, which looks like a city that exploded into concrete housing blocks and remains of this Ottoman city. So here you see the same comparison between what was in the 1940s still the Ottoman city, and then how it was replaced on the exact same spot by this fragmented and layered sort of remains of the city. And I'll go really quickly because we are limited in time on a similar study we did on aerial views, which are exhibited at the Biennale in Vienna, where you see again the Ottoman city before the British mandate, then the addition of the British mandate, and then you see it grow, and already the British sort of finding new routes through the Ottoman fabric. And then with the establishment of the State of Israel, a massive demolition of the Ottoman city, still maintaining the British mandate, and then some of the old Ottoman structures like the main mosque and the main church and the main market were the only pieces that were left, together with the Khan, which is the main commercial trade building. And then you see slowly the modernist city growing and rising on the ruins of this Ottoman city. And this is until recently where we ended up with. So that was the city as we found it and the one that we started working with. Here you see a similar comparison between the situation in the 1940s. You see the Ottoman grid here, the entrance to the city, which was this market street and the covered market here. And then here you see the Ottoman city with the Khan that I pointed out before, the mosque and the church. So while we were dealing with a very complex and layered and fragmented city, we're also dealing with a city that is located right next to Israel's international airport, 15 minutes by train from Tel Aviv, and at the center of a network of small towns and kibbutz places and villages. We realized that the gap between the potential of the city and its reality was enormous. We had a heterogeneous city housing a very diverse group of Christian, Muslim, and Jewish communities from different backgrounds and with different collective memories, sharing only the extremely poor living conditions. So again, this is the part that we were dealing with, the old city, which shows the biggest mix of these communities. So this became then the base for what we call the elastic grid, which included networks of movement and urban fabric interweaved with a revived network of erased circulation patterns from the Ottoman city as a pedestrian and green network, creating an infrastructure to preserve existing communities and allow former future inhabitants to join. So this elastic grid stitches together historic networks of public spaces and urban fabrics, some of them still physically present and others only manifested in the collective memory of current and former inhabitants and historic maps. The new grid connects existing layers of the landscape with future networks of urban life, creating a diverse and highly differentiated fabric of open and built spaces. The goal was preserving and strengthening existing communities of the city dwellers, market salesmen, and visitors, while opening up the city for future inhabitants and visitors. In parallel to this general master plan and in parallel to our long-term vision, we developed tracks of immediate design interventions in order to shorten the time it would take to reach our goals. And we really see that this is happening. This is changing the reality as we go. And we translated parts of the plan, which is basically, if this is the larger plan, you see in red, the part that coincide with the original Ottoman city. We designated these areas for immediate intervention using a very coherent architectural language. And that was then what we call the action plan, which started with an intervention in the old market area, the food and also second-hand market, which was transformed rather than just a market into a market square that operates both on days and off days as a public space. Our design used the basic unit and the existing operational mechanism of the market and turned it into a system that can be flexible and adjust itself to its surroundings. And here you see some of the process of how this market was reconstructed. And throughout the reconstruction, we discovered that there was this historic building. You need me to finish up?
Hello, yeah, I'm the chair and the moderator, or one of the two.
I'm finishing.
1 minute left, sorry.
No problem. So this was a holy site that we discovered in the market area, a holy Muslim site for prayer. And we went through a very interesting process with all the sheikhs of the city, the main representatives of the Muslim community that all signed on a common agreement to reopen this holy site for prayer. And it became a very important element in the market. Here you see the synagogue right next to it. These are some trials we did with the flooring. This is a place from above under construction. Here you see the prayer, the Muslim prayer site. Which became a main element in the market after we finished with the construction. Here you see all the construction. These are fixed shading, and these are temporary shading on market days. So here you see some more images. This is when the market is working. And at the same time, I should mention that while the Biennale opened in Vienna, we were here going through a very difficult war situation, which I assume you probably heard about. And this is how Lot looked like as we were sending our models to Vienna, with violent riots and killings, which were coinciding, of course, with the war with Gaza. And also the market area was affected. So we were preparing these models and printing different stages of Lot while it was going, but at the same time, we were dealing with a very difficult situation where the market itself was affected as well. But when the riots ended, the city slowly returned to daily life, and we've seen people joining forces in rebuilding and restoring. And despite this very complex and challenging and painful context, we see that they're not giving up, that the market came back to life only 1 week after the riots and has proven the resilience of this place and its hope for better futures. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Else gives us hope in a way. Thank you very much for that way, and the final 2 or 3 photos. Thanks a lot. Actually, I would love to go for a beer now after all these images.
But you know, it's too early. But we should talk about fermentation now.
Yeah, fermentation is a very good idea. We have a fantastic expert now, and he has ideas about how fermentation could change the future, could change to a more sustainable world.
So please welcome Maciej Kmara from
Kmara Rosinke in Berlin.
Thank you.
Hello? We can't hear you. You cannot hear me?
Yes, now.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. So you can start your presentation now. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Maciej. I'm sorry that I'm not physically here, but the trains in Germany have striked and I didn't get to Vienna. So I'll just start very quickly. No, that was the wrong thing. Up. Okay. I will tell you as much as possible in 10 minutes, and so it will be quite chaotically, and the images don't fit really well to what I'm talking about, but it doesn't matter. About 10 years ago, we have built our first kitchen. It had wheels, so we went around the world with it and invited strangers to eat with us. With these projects, we got to know many people, new dishes, ingredients, and a sense for the social aspects of cooking. Then we went to build more and more kitchens, mainly on wheels, some without. Actually, much more kitchens than I will show here in a second. And even a book got published about our mobile kitchens. We have cooked more and more. We did pop-up restaurants. We worked with chefs. We were designing restaurants or kitchens for chefs and cooked a lot ourselves. After a while, we got very much into the topic of fermentation. Eastern European soups, ferments for seasoning, for drinking, and also the simplest, but for the most fascinating form of fermentation, bread. Fermentation is like alchemy. You take water, salt, and flour. You don't need any industrial yeast or nothing. And if you do it well, you can create an incredibly complex food with different textures, smells, and also plenty of umami. If you look further into fermentation on an industrial scale, you get very soon to real magic. You learn about medical technology, things like penicillin, and you come to precision fermentation and learn about companies like Solar Food that can produce out through carbon extraction, a protein powder. Sounds like science fiction, but that's precision fermentation. The biggest thing in the food industry right now, but more on that later. The big question here today is, what Alice Jakubas asked me to talk about is, what can I or we as designers really do? It probably makes more sense to study synthetic biology than design and go into precision fermentation if you want to do something in food. But if you are still at the beginning of your studies, you should think about it. For the others, let's go to design instead of giving up. Sure, you can design kitchens and try to think of how the kitchen of the future can make you cook healthier, more ecologically, and so on. And yes, there is very much space for it. The kitchen will change in the next 2 decades like nothing else in our flats. And in the kitchen, you will be able to reach the problems of our society. I will not start about the IoT in the kitchen, ghost kitchens, kitchen robots, or food printers, as it's an endless topic. But in whatever field of food you want to work, I believe that if you really want to achieve something, even small design studios have to start working more in teams and start thinking big. Our world is super complex. Modernism was already a while ago. And the answer to everything will not be the universalistic thought of a rectangle. To deal with complex tasks, you need really many people. Ideally, collaborations can start already at the university, but they can also be initiated later through projects and pursued in the medium and long term. There are many opportunities also through government funding for collaborations between companies and institutions or even universities abroad like the MIT, from feasibility studies to development support. For more than 10 years, we have seen materials made from algae, orange peel, and coffee waste at the major design fairs. And sorry, but it got a little boring. Why? Because we see always the same plates, the same packaging, the same bases. But only a few companies, like for example Notpla in the field of algae or Coffee Farm, the cups made from coffee ground, had the patience and staying power to really make a working product and then most importantly, to scale it up. Producing materials from renewable raw materials or leftovers is today a technology project in the second semester at many universities. Also, to make it clear to students, that is not complicated to create a halfway functioning prototype. But the complexity lies in the last percent, in perfection and in producing these things in industrial processes, scaling them up and bringing them to market at a realistic price. I don't want to be a naysayer, but I don't think we have the time anymore to keep presenting small awareness projects on the production line in design, which I've certainly also done for long enough. There is simply not much time left, or no time at all. That's why it's especially important to work on the big problems in the individual creative disciplines. In architecture, you do it probably on concrete. In the product design world, you're doing it with plastics. But here we're talking about food. As most people know, whenever it comes to ecological nutrition, the big bad word of veganism hangs in the air. It's a scary word for many politicians. A big question is not if, because we can, but how to change behavior by design. Sure, many people question the moral high ground to do so. The big consumer technology companies don't ask whether it's moral to tempt us to buy more unnecessary stuff and produce even more unnecessary stuff. I'm absolutely convinced that plant-based is the future, but not in the classical sense. Whether you think it's good or bad, in our food culture, meat has such an important established role that we can only convince through products that are initially comparable and later even better. And here, design and also design thinking is definitely called for. Companies like Biopetrolia, Melt and Marble, or Ginkgo, which have their origin in synthetic biology and come from the context of artificial fuel production, are becoming big players. They are becoming modular suppliers for the old meat industry. This allows textures, different melting points, and even the replacements of unhealthy fats with healthy ones, and umami to be produced as an ingredient. Alternative proteins and umami through precision fermentation. Of course, you can say that's stupid, and why just don't go vegan? Because no one will. For the last 50 years, we as a Western society have been told that prosperity is based on having a schnitzel on our plate every day and being able to go to Italy or Croatia for 2 weeks a year and do some skiing in the winter. Stem cell meat is already available in some countries, others will follow, and in 4 or 5 years, the latest, it will take over an important part of our protein production, as they just will be cheaper and healthier. Other production forms that are being heavily used are 3D printing, as also Revo Foods from Vienna with the vegan salmon does. Precision fermentation in any form is the future in getting an alternative to blood flavor, umami or milk proteins, and of course, new ways of dealing with mushrooms, which are not classically animal or plant and can go more in the animal direction in terms of texture, are important. I could go on for hours about this, but I have to keep it short. What's interesting, and here I'm addressing all creative people who are listening and also myself, the whole old protein market and all technologies have one thing in common. It's data. From flavor analysis over fermentation process simulation to recipe design via artificial intelligence. Yes, we designers in particular often dislike data and computing, but in food and manufacturing, we won't get around it. We have to see the extreme unsolved problems and discussions about the security of our data, but also the opportunities. Already technology can and is making organic farming more efficient and revolutionizing it. There are drones that liquidate individual diseased plants or search for slugs, analyze growth, and it does also enable mixed cultures on a larger scale. Apart from getting as far away as possible from the classical meat production as quickly as possible, we urgently need to protect our soils and water sources and work out better, more efficient ways of organic farming. I mean, vertical and indoor farming are nice and interesting, but why should we do that if it's also ecological possible to have high quality vegetables from earth? I believe that with a creative profession, we have great opportunities to support companies in this field, whether it's big players or small companies that function on the edge of DIY like FarmBot. Designers and architects often see things from a different angle. And even if it's not in the process, there are still many questions in how to communicate these new brands, how to visually present them, how to package these products. But what we can also do and what we urgently need to work on is a a picture, a vision of the future. Even if everyone, even the green politicians, always want to avoid the word renunciation and talk about alternatives. Sorry, but it just will not work without renunciation. But that doesn't have to be a bad thing in a world where we have far too much of everything. I bake bread with my students, hold cooking classes with chefs, talk with them and with philosophers about delight or enjoyment of food and cooking, invite to product design classes vegan activists or synthetic biologists. We are the first generation that doesn't have to suffer from cooking, and we have to think together about how a realistic future in which we want to live in could look like. And there are quite some options. But we can't just rely on politicians and the food industry. We also need to design desirable futures to have a goal in mind that we want to strive for. A big question is not if, because we can, but how to change behavior by design. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I'm leaving and see you later.
Straight on time and very inspiring. Thanks a lot, Maciej.
How about a toilet break?
Not yet, I'm sorry. It's a little bit too early, I would say. But maybe we have a guy here.
We could talk about urine, no?
Yeah, he has a very specific idea about urine.
Please welcome Antonio Scarponi. He will tell us how to use urine as a design tool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for inviting me here, and I want to acknowledge again and thank everybody who organized this event, and also all the people behind all the screens and all the microphones, so thank you very much. So, how to grow the city with homeopathic doses of human ponics. So before we dig into this idea of human ponics, I would like to start from this project, which is called Malthus, to acknowledge and celebrate the first scientist who asked himself the question, how much food can the Earth produce to feed its population? And this is a little experiment that I made in my office for an exhibition, asking the question how much food you can produce into a normal modern environment. And in order to understand this process, kind of like a research, I find out that you can produce 1 meal a day with this small device. This small device uses aquaponics. Aquaponics is a farming technique that uses fish to fertilize plants, and the plants clean and filter the water for the fish. So now, the concept I want to bring you today is that in 2021, in our planet, we are the fish. So, let's dig into it a little bit more. This project here is the first aquaponic rooftop farm that I've designed a while ago in Basel. And it is a 400 square meter farm producing tilapia, a type of fish, and vegetable at the same time. But the idea is that it is conceived as a device to grow the city, to farm the city, and to activate unused flat industrial rooftops. And the idea is to use industrial material as found, combining them together, and see how you can actually extend the productivity of a city at kilometer zero sustainability within the urban fabric in a convenient way, with a farming logic. But the challenge of this type of strategies is the concentrated load on a roof that was not conceived to receive any load. So with this logic of keeping the idea of urban agriculture as a way to farm the city, I've designed this farm that overcome this problem somehow by redistributing the concentrated load in a wider surface. So this thing can produce up to 10 kilos of fresh food a day in 25 square meters. And it can land in any flat rooftop because the load is not concentrated. Furthermore, it solves another problem of urban agriculture, which is soil and air pollution. This is something that nobody talks about it much, but the air of the city is polluted. We learned it today from Urban Think Tank. And this device is a simple rudimental system that actually filters the air, cooling it, and allowing possible urban farming using hydroponics or aquaponics in urban environment. Why I'm interested in this kind of techniques? Because you can grow food anywhere. You can grow food in a contaminated environment. You can grow much more in way less space, consuming less water. So these are challenging aspects that, technically speaking, astronauts grow food this way up in the space using hydroponics. And so this idea of activating flat rooftop and activating community, this is not a money thing. This is a way to show people how you can do it, train them, activate them, and create a kind of like an enjoyment for themselves. And activate all the, not only surfaces, but also unemployed or elderly people, or in turning farming into a form of like a pleasure. But with the same line, a few years ago, I was asked to undercome feasibility studies to find out how much food you can technically produce into a city. What is the best formula? And I came up with, I like to call it kind of like a new urban typology. And it is a thing also made with ready-made, as-found kind of industrial material, but this was a business kind of oriented project. And together with the University of Bologna, we came up to the conclusion that it is possible, without complicated rocket science, to produce up to 5 tons of fresh food a day in 1,000 square meters. But the interesting thing of this device, I'd like to call it, urban device, then again, is not only to produce, it is designed to produce food, but to produce employment and to activate sketchy part of the city where the, so to speak, land doesn't cost as much, because there is always this aspect that needs to be convenient. And another aspect that is interesting, that 50% of the product, aka the roots, are conceived to be put back into a system, biodigesting, producing gas that run the farm. Furthermore, the idea of the business model behind this is that you can deliver the food to the restaurants and collect the food waste afterwards, which is extremely rich of fats, and you can actually put it back into the digester to produce again gas that actually run the farm. So the motto was kind of like from farm to table and return. And it is designed to develop, optimize for different type of crops, different type of techniques, and different type of hydroponics techniques. And the whole implantation can actually be dismantled and taken apart and bring it elsewhere and activate a different function when the mission of the device is completed, which is activating the city. But speaking of human ponics specifically, I would like to bring this example. This is a box widely produced and distributed by IKEA. A while ago, I was asked to design an exhibition in Zurich at Cabaret Voltaire called Revolution to Smash Global Capitalism. And the idea that I introduced to the architect, to the curator, was to say that today you need capitalism to smash capitalism. Capitalism is the only force that can smash himself. Great, so what shall we do? Let's go to IKEA, let's buy everything we need. We designed the whole exhibition with IKEA parts that we can take back before the customer satisfaction policy expires. So we bring the stuff back, we say we don't like the color, and the exhibition doesn't cost anything. So we did this, and I designed, basically all we needed is an instruction manual to activate any exhibition space near an IKEA store, and all you needed is an instruction manual to actually make the exhibition happen, which was featuring many artists, activists at the time, which are still very active nowadays. But few boxes remained in my office, and I wanted to document stuff. And I said, wait a minute, but fish urine are identical for human urine. What if I use my own urine to fertilize the plants? And I did some research, and I found out this is actually, it is a common practice in developing country, and I tried myself. And the interesting part is that you need homeopathic doses of your own urine, aka 2.5 milliliter every 5 liters, to give you an idea. So it doesn't smell anything, it's really, and you really understand, this is why I like it, conceptually you create a closed loop between what you eat and what you excrete, which is, in my opinion, is a very big metaphor of our society. Whatever we throw out of the window, it will sooner or later come back to our table. So the idea was to not anymore to make another product, but make an instruction manual to activate people like seeds and make this idea grow and make design and create a product that doesn't exist unless you make it. All you need is a instruction manual, the idea of design as a form of information, as a narrative that activates people and things and reposition this relationship. So it's not an IKEA hack in terms of the furniture, but it's an IKEA hack in terms of IKEA infrastructure worldwide. And this project opened many doors. One day I got a phone call from a young Italian startup. They say, hey, you hacked IKEA, but we hacked you. And they designed this lamp, which it's a high-tech LED that actually fit my system. I keep it as an example to see how this became kind of like an open platform where many collaboration, project, installation, and so on took place, as also this very exhibition. So I would like to conclude by saying that when we talk about eating, when we talk about food, when we talk about art, when we talk about architecture, there are many theories, but there is one unique, universal law if we want to make a change, which is enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antonio.
I have to say, when I was a student, I spent many times here in the Architekturzentrum, but this was the very first lecture about urine. But anyhow, I didn't catch the fly, but it would have been a proper snack this afternoon.
Try to grow mushrooms instead for your food security.
Not necessarily. We have somebody here, Katharina Unger, who will tell us something about insects and mushrooms, maybe.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Katerina. Thanks so much for having me here in this interesting conference and event. I prepared a little bit. Unfortunately, I didn't cover the mushrooms that were mentioned. But yeah, apologies for only covering the MAC logo. I know there should be many more logos on there. But I'll start right away. Yeah, thank you. So my story actually started here in Vienna. I'm from the very southeast of Austria. But I studied at Angewandte with Hartmut Esslinger and Fiona Rabai, and I think these two really kind of combine and reflect in my work still until today. On the one hand, a very practical, industrial kind of approach, and on the other hand, a very experimental one. And I've been working in the topic of food in my design practice and in my professional life in general for quite some time. I graduated from school with this project. It's an insect farm for the home. So actually most of my work is in alternative proteins, specifically insects. And this project was about me going to Hong Kong, actually, and living there. I lived many, many years in Asia. And there I walked the food markets and I saw everything that's there in the fish market. And till this day, I have no clue actually what everything is. I know a very small fraction of it. And I was wondering, how does this fit together? Like you have these concrete desert, really, and I'm an avid diver as well. I dive in the oceans of Hong Kong, and I know that this fish definitely does not come from the oceans of Hong Kong. There's like the occasional Nemo swimming by, but not much more than that. So I was wondering, like, how will this work in the future? How will the food system work in the future? How does it work on a systemic level, really, to supply proteins to us people, especially in a more urbanized world? And this project was very much about creating closed-loop circles from the proximity of your home. Like, I was like thinking, how could you empower the individual, the person at home, to be more sustainable and use food waste that you have at home and grow proteins on it. So that's the black soldier fly larvae, it's called. It's a really great converter of all kinds of food waste. It lives in more southern regions, in the southern states of the United States, in the south of Europe as well. Not really here, it can't survive the winter. And the whole loop and the whole life cycle of the insect happens inside this device, from pupation to the flies that don't eat, they just drink. They lay their eggs, and then they self-harvest. Actually, they have a really cool biological mechanism to crawl up somewhere, fall down, and they fall down into this little drawer, and then you can harvest and eat them, which I did a lot during my studies. And this project really brought me all around the world, and it started from this design project, and now it became a company that I'm running in both Hong Kong and Vienna. And those two offices that we have focus on very different aspects of insect proteins and protein supply. So you can see here, the very first one was 2013. Then 2015, we launched our first commercial device. We manufactured it in China. We spent a lot of blood, sweat, and tears really in the factories setting this up. We were thinking, we're industrial designers, we can do this, but manufacturing is really a different level. And then we launched it, we shipped it all around the world, I think in 48 countries worldwide. We shipped these devices where people could grow mealworms in their home and then eat it, and they did. It's really interesting. In 2017, 2018, we launched a separate, much smaller version of it, which we called Hive Explorer, which we still sell today in Hong Kong, mostly for education, because it turned out that most people actually were really interested in telling people about it and really, showing people what sustainable food production means. So the education part of it became actually much, much bigger than the actual eating and consumption part of it. Also, of course, from a business standpoint, which is what I have to look at from today, that was a more meaningful market to pursue. And then in 2019, we came back to Vienna and opened an office here, and here we're really pursuing industrial scale technologies. So you can see part of our building on this picture. So now we're building this at an industrial scale, converting thousands of tons of waste every year with our factories, and producing a lot of proteins. And the background of it is that we are running short. We are actually already short on proteins in Europe. So we have 100 million tons protein gap by 2030, and a lot of it is actually for animal feed, which I think is a very controversial topic, but also for human food. We actually import 75% of our proteins from abroad into Europe. So that's really kind of something that we're tackling with this project. Also, protein production is effectively the second biggest factor for climate change. By 2030, we're going to emit 9 gigatons of CO2 by conventional protein production. So our current ways of this production really consume our planet, while as the food waste that we generate in this world is a huge issue as well. So if it were a country, it would be the third biggest emitter of greenhouse gases after China and the USA, and we're not really tackling this. By 2030, the EU has proposed a plan to cut down drastically, so industry is getting under more and more pressure to actually tackle this, and I think that's exactly the position that I can see for insect and insect proteins, because we are avid supporters of plant-based proteins. I'm all for that, but the insect has a specific position in the ecosystem, and also I think in the industry it can have that to convert waste into proteins. And in that respect, even if you compare it to soy protein, we cut down 92% of emissions compared to soy protein. We cut 70% of emissions in comparison to composting the waste, actually. So there is a lot of environmental benefit behind it, and you can use insect proteins as human food, of course, but also as animal feed, and create really a closed loop system. So we're talking about industry waste, such as bakery waste, potatoes, all kinds of waste that go into insect proteins that are fed to animals or people, and also produce fertilizer, so the poop of the insects becomes fertilizer that then again can be used to grow plants. We have a really great CO2 balance and are much more efficient, of course, if you compare it to the most detrimental sources of protein, which is red meat and beef. And yeah, we're pursuing these two streams. As I mentioned, Hive Explorer is for education in Hong Kong. We do products, workshops. We've developed a curriculum. We're also going into Vienna schools this season, which is really exciting. And then the industrial technology. So, and I think this is very much what we're pursuing as a business. We really believe that building the mindset and building the understanding in people about insects, that they're nothing scary, sorry? Okay, yeah, I'm too close. That's really important. But then on the other hand, we really wanted to create a way to tackle the issue from a systemic level, from a top-down level as well. Those were the devices along the way. That's our current education product. So it's much smaller, it's kind of fun, everything happens inside this device. You can grow all stages of the mealworms in your home. And it works really well in Asia as well, where I think there's also a big need for sustainability education. Yeah, those are our values and principles. Of course, it ranges from food waste recycling down to critical thinking and problem solving on the educational end. And maybe a few points about our industrial technologies. So from a design standpoint, this is super interesting for me. I have to finish up to design a factory now as compared to a product that someone has in their homes. But basically our interface starts where factories produce their waste. So say they're starch producers and they have byproducts of starch production where those wastes come out. That's where our factory starts. We mix the substrate, we prepare the substrate so that it becomes insect feed, and then we deliver baby larvae for them to rear. So our customers kind of just have to have this black box on site, which is quite large. It's a couple of thousand square meters and it's quite high, but still I consider it a product. And then they harvest the end products, which is protein powder, fertilizer, and fats, which currently are mostly used for pet food applications and feed applications. However, also we're working in the human food space with factories as well. And here you can see roughly like a scale how our factory kind of fits into our customers' site. That's kind of just to see what the scale is like. So as mentioned, we're talking about all kinds of wastes, and we have to cover something that is feed related, but pre-consumer waste is something that is a really big opportunity in the future. And with that, I'm already done. And you're welcome to visit our website, of course. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Katharina. So let's go into the woods now.
Why? Do you want to find some more insects there?
No, I want to talk about radical architecture. And therefore, we need Momoyo Kaichima, co-founder of Atelier Bow Wow in Tokyo, who is here with us. Please come
Welcome
to
her
the stage.
on stage.
Yeah, the video. Okay. Timber is a very interesting material for architecture. It's also related to the nature, so and also from the forest, and also the many different process to come to forest to the building. So first step of the workshop is a visit on site. On site, at least this place, but same time also in forest. So that's why we can go a little bit the origin of the material, so to understand or include our design process. And then of course the end, the all materials could be built as a building by own hand almost. So that is also very big challenging. They also try to learn how the every element of the material could be in the design. So there is no waste, kind of. So timber itself is an essence, I think.
Die Grundidee war 15 Bäume, die im Winter umgefallen sind, während einem Schneesturm, umzuwandeln in ein Projekt, um so die Themen der Nachhaltigkeit zu zeigen. Besonders spannend war, mit den begrenzten Ressourcen was anzustellen, was am Ende dann präsentabel ist und wirklich ein Ergebnis ist. Und dann kamen natürlich so Faktoren hinzu, wie dass wir es auch selbst bauen müssen, was gar nicht so leicht war.
Also wir haben ja eigentlich angefangen mit jedem individuellen Projekt, wo wir innerhalb von etwa 2 Wochen entworfen haben. Und aus diesen 7 Projekten, die wir schlussendlich hatten, haben wir eigentlich probiert, so ein bisschen die Essenz und so die guten Sachen in einem Projekt zu komprimieren. Und dann hat es eigentlich schnell so ein bisschen Arbeitsgruppen gegeben mit Schleifen, mit Auslegen, was haben wir alles für Materialien.
Der Baum, der am Anfang ein ganzer Stamm ist, der bleibt eigentlich auch sichtbar in der Struktur. Das ist eigentlich noch das Wichtige. Uns ist wichtig, dass man die Geschichte von dem Baum auch in der Struktur erkennt.
Ja. Und es könnte alles wieder auseinandergenommen werden. Also es ist wirklich gemacht für einen temporären Bau.
Das Gute an dieser Struktur ist auch, dass sie erweiterbar ist. Also man kann sie immer, eigentlich unendlich erweitern.
Absolut.
Es war für mich auch eine ganz neue Erfahrung, was nicht nur zu planen und zu entwerfen, sondern es dann auch umzusetzen. Denn normalerweise an der Universität überlegt man sich ja nur was und präsentiert es dann, aber es wird niemals in die Realität umgesetzt. Jetzt zum ersten Mal es danach auch bauen zu müssen, das bringt ganz neue Faktoren mit sich.
So thank you very much for inviting me to have a lecture here. And but the first video is timber. So unfortunately, I don't bring the food issues today. So, but yes, but this timber was insect bites because of the climate change. So that's why this kind of environment is always changing by this. Where is the front page? Like this. Yes. And originally, we tried to do some timber workshop in Vienna for this summer. But COVID could not reach this goal, and I switched to the idea to change to the site. So from Vienna to Zurich, because it's my neighborhood and more easy to tackle. And we found our campus there is a forest nearby. And we asked one Vald Labo, so one research team, a biologist and education team, tried to make some program.
for all. So. And the students also want to working for this. And Martin, so Valdem Labo, so he introduced the students to what it is. And then after, so we got some timber from them, so 15 different diameter timber. And then I asked the students to this is the first proposal after the 1 month. So they tried to tackle how the log could be make some space for valid labo education. But you see, so some of the timber is too small and a very different form using like industrial timbers. But after these propositions, we start to discuss what is the potential back to the original log. And because a log has a very different diameter and also much more massive, and also some has a problem with insects, and also some has a lack some weight, some different quality. And students start to work with meal factory to negotiate how the could be sliced into the building. And then this is a project by them to assemble from the different idea. And then it stands on the inner campus behind the Coop store. And building should be made by hand without machine almost. And we expect the student done by in a week. And the joint is very simple, just lock each other. And sawmill factory cut very good way for by students' proposal. And this is the process and all done. And also finals beam are very heavy, around I think 100 or 200 kilo. So that's why in the campus, many students supported to bring up together. So it was also almost a shrine in Japan, so to every 20 years, like a Ise shrine, so to create new buildings. So this is also the interesting enjoyment for making together. And after that, we enjoyed a nap on the floor. And it's also very interesting space for somehow crossing the Japanese culture and Swiss culture. So it looks like a temple, like a Greek temple, but also I feel Ise shrine or something Japanese strong shrine culture. And we had a opening, and this is overall together. So and the sawmill factory, so they came join the apero, and we had a very good conversation. And I think eating also very important for material. So I think today I was very fascinated by the several inputs from the young generations. And also I'm very enjoy the reason how we should engage to go back to the origin of the materials. And then I think this is also a lot of the sense to create a new network and also understanding the process, how our society will industrialize. And if we go back to the origin, so we can more commit to in between this way. So that's why like a design should always to try to intervene in between this process. And then I hope we could do also the next time, eat subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we have about 10 minutes left for discussion and questions. Therefore, I'd like to ask all the speakers who are here in person to come up to the podium. And also I would like to ask, if possible, to have the online speakers on the screen.
Yeah, we would really appreciate your questions here in the hall, or maybe if you have questions somewhere in the world of the internet. The only problem is that we just have 10 minutes late for Q&A. We are very, very sorry about it, but there is another plenary after us. But if you have a burning question, and I would really like to see or to hear one, we have to tell you that there is a microphone over there, and you have to stand up, please, and go to this microphone and ask the question there. It's a kind of AZW sucht den Superstar. So please stand up and go there and queue till the end of the hall and ask your question.
No, please don't queue. Please raise your hand first, because otherwise we're going to have a... Please raise your hand. Oh, we have a question already.
Yeah, please stand up and go to the mic. If you find the way.
Hello, everyone. My question is for Katharina Unger. I'd like to know if your technology gets used in more, like the big, well, wait. The thing you presented, the big construction, is it used already in some kind of, well, yeah. Is it? Okay.
Yeah, we are implementing it already. So we have actually our demo site in the south of Vienna, in Simmering.
Is it possible to visit?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's possible to visit. We also do tours every now and then for groups. And yeah, there you can see it actually. There we demonstrate it. We also use that site as a kind of like project development space. So basically what happens is like customers sends us their waste, literally, like we receive the waste and then we put it into our facility and we test it at an industrial scale so that we can run the economics. And we're having several projects all over Europe and actually one in Asia, so in Spain, in Lithuania, one in Germany and one in Thailand.
I would also like to know, here in Vienna, who are your customers? Who sent you the waste?
Yeah, so in Vienna, we do not have anyone specifically in Vienna. We have a few companies that we're working with in Austria. So,
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have another question.
I'm reading out a question that was put online on YouTube or Facebook, I'm not sure. Is the Aquaponic Globe an open source project?
At the moment, not at the moment, because there are some research and development that are still open. So it is not open source at the moment for the time being.
But is it planned for the future?
Who knows about the future? I'm an architect, not a fortune teller, somebody said. It would be ideal, but the question is finding a sustainable way to finance it and develop it further.
Thanks a lot. Do we have... Yes, please. There is another gentleman standing up.
I was intrigued by Armando Silva's presentation, particularly the reference to a graffiti over a graffiti. I would like to know what copyright issues you have encountered, particularly because I am dealing with a project where we're thinking of redoing dumplings over different kinds of dumplings.
Yeah. Okay, yes. When I used the graffiti, I was talking about the archives. So in that way, I try to express myself how graffiti is not only the mark, the graffiti mark, but it's a kind of conception that the scenes are coming from the margin and become more part of the mentality of one city. So this is the way I use the idea of graffiti. And then with the example with the building in Vienna is because had this idea that start in very marginalistic conception, and little by little the people from Vienna is going to accept this, and today I understand it became more as a kind of icon of the city. No, I don't know if with this I can answer you.
Thank you.
One more question.
Can we also engage in?
Yes, please. This was my idea,
yes,
actually.
Just taking value at time. Thanks for all the presentations. Some of the projects I know very well. Others were really new to me, including yours, Katharina, and also Marseille's here online. Very intriguing. I'm actually asking myself, and perhaps there are some people in the audience too, if you think about all these different lines of innovative thinking, you presented the most successful project, Katharina, if I understand right, which is actually an educational project. Because what my question is, also in the context of architecture, of urban transformation, how do you start that, right? So that there's a lot of people doing a lot of interesting things. If you now in the shoes of a decision maker, and I think the RZW has also this educational motive, or how do we think about startups like the Vienna Business Agency? How do you start something like that? And I do think this educational line that you actually mentioned, where suddenly you think about factories, but people have to first get tuned to something new. What role is actually uniting these many different lines in framing it? And I do think that education, that the university has probably a role finding completely new lines. It seems a bit complex to do this by itself at once. So I'm just throwing this here at you, and obviously at anybody who wants to pick up on it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can add to that. So I do think that communication is key, right? Like you have to, I mean, in the insect world, again, referring to the place I know best, it's like we found out that, or there is a study public that says you have to, I think, remind people remind people about a new concept at least 8 times. I think it's 8 or 9 times, until they really get accustomed to it, right? So they hear it once, they forget about it. They hear it twice, they forget about it again. And then the 3rd time they start, okay, they start remembering that they've heard it before. But then only after 8 or 9 times, you really start maybe thinking about it again, and you maybe start adopting it. You maybe start buying a product related to it, or maybe start implementing it into your daily life. And I think that's what education does, is like bring up topics and put things out there to discuss and to bring it into people's minds. So I think it is really important for that space. Yeah.
Marseille, you very eloquently also presented the challenge of making out of a prototype a marketable product, or really making it big. So I thought that was also very useful. In the frame, obviously, of Armando's imaginary, I can imagine that we need to work on this ideas first, right? On these ideas, it seems that a palette of new products, be it a space of Momoyo or your human ponic production, it really needs a framing.
Yes, I'm interested in processes, and as a designer, also as an architect, I'm interested in making a product less rather than a product more. And therefore, I'm interested in simplify process and engage people that they can develop it themselves. And that goes in the direction of the open source question that I received before. But it's a broad aspect that it cannot be handled in a Q&A so simply, because there is the world of open source is very vast. And one thing is intellectual property, another thing is copyright, and so on. And also in the Creative Commons, it's also there are different degrees of freedom. But the point for me is that we need to change the way we do change. We know that in the last 20 years it doesn't work. We need to find other ways, and maybe we can start from scratch, from an idea.
I would also like to add something to that discussion is also the power of digitalization, which we have now, because suddenly, like you mentioned, open source, we can really reach the masses of people, and we can really make people move and change and access to people. I think that's a very powerful thing, because we as architects might think on a very small scale or on scales even, but in the digital scale actually doesn't matter for us anymore, because we can access anyone. And I think also this whole aspect of distributed knowledge production can be a very, very interesting and powerful medium to change and to impact how our world and our society is actually working, from a very local and small scale initiative to a whole global initiative. I think that's also the power of this process.
To my mind, and again, any comments welcomed at any time, Vienna is the perfect place, actually, as a city that prides itself have such a high living quality, but I think a lot of that quality is also in doubt. It is measured by what we just heard. It is actually also transforming, right? A lot what we appreciate, we figure actually out has a lot of burden and produces a lot of problems. I would actually wonder if there's an area in this city, and I'm sure it is, because we saw some of those places, but I'm asking also you to continue our quest from the Studio Mobil to collect also your ideas into this topic. Where's a place where you could actually bring the wooden pavilion of Studio Bauwau and Katharina Unger's insect farms with human ponics agriculture, and I'm looking here in the back of me, Else's market, etc., in one frame, in an overlapping reality, in a lab where we hopefully do one thing, not to leave the masses of the people. And I think a lot of people are not listening to us today. We have to bring this also in an analog reality, in building the city as we know it outside of here. Where is that place where we could actually start bringing the projects on a small territory in one frame overlapping? That is actually, if I try to conclude a bit here, I know time is running out, I would say that would be the right starting point, perhaps a project for the Architekturzentrum in the future.
Where can you make problems? I think that's very important, make problems somewhere. Thank you very much.
We have the chance to discuss also afterwards in the break, which will start in about 5 minutes, because we have prepared a final video and 3 slides, I think, just to finish this session, and then we go for the coffee break, and we have more opportunity to talk face to face.
And we hope to hear a lot of more questions than outside during the coffee. May I ask you to
start the presentation?
That was also at the Viktor Adler Markt, by the way, during the Studio Mobil visit.
Grüß Gott. Wir haben eine Frage. Wir haben so viel vom Supermarkt, aber wir würden eigentlich lieber selber kochen. Würden Sie uns da was eintauschen? Ein paar Chips und Sie geben uns ein paar Kartoffeln?
Oder Gurken und wir kriegen Gurken.
Geben Sie uns drei Kartoffeln gegen ein Packerl Chips?
Oder Tomaten oder eine Tomate.
Tauschen. Wollen Sie nicht tauschen? Ja? Aber was dürfen wir uns nehmen? Dürfen wir 3 Kartoffeln?
Ja, bitte.
3 Kartoffeln? Super. 4. Danke.
Hey, super.
Nehmen wir gleich. Danke vielmals.
Danke. Gurken nicht.
Gurken nicht.
Tomaten? Danke. Auch nicht.
Aber danke.
Was? Danke. Tschüss.
Tschüss.
Danke.
Würden Sie uns da was eintauschen?
Eine Tomate gegen eine Dose.
Eine Tomaten. Wir geben Ihnen eine Tomatendose. Oh, sehr gut. 2 Dosen, 2 Tomaten.
2 Dosen. Was ist die? Dose 29, die Tomaten.
Ah ja, das sind Ochsenherz. Okay, 3 Dosen Tomaten. Okay.
Aber die ist leer. Also Soße geht's mit 2 geht's.
2 geht?
Nein, ein Chip geht nicht.
Ein Chip, okay. Eine Tomate, eine schöne.
Ja, klein ist deine Milch.
Ist okay oder nicht?
Ist schon okay. Spaß machen, geht's gut.
If we examine our traditions and cultural habits, we find ourselves asking why we eat the way we do. Could we not eat quite differently?
Culture is man-made. So is our eating culture and the way we produce food. That means we can change it. The question is, what do we want to achieve? What are our aims, our beliefs and values?
It's a valid question. After all, the way in which we produce our food and we design it is not just a matter of tradition, culture, health, diet, and culinary art, but it also connects to CO2 emissions, land use, water consumption, energy, and transport systems.
Any change to our eating habits has a direct impact on social and economic processes and on the ecosystem.
So what can we as designers do? Designing is a profoundly political act. With every design, we change the world, ecologically, economically, and socially.
Culture is relative, it is man-made, and it is changeable.
Culture can be changed, food systems can be changed. Food systems reflect the values of a society. In order to change food systems, it is necessary to change cultural values.
And this is our final video. Thank you very much. We've tried to get inspired before the conference today by all our fantastic speakers we had today, and this is the result of the inspiration.
Thank you very much. This is the end of the panel for the first session. Now we have about 20 minutes break, and then at 6 o'clock we start with the keynotes. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to Hani and Bunny for chairing this session and for this nice wrap-up through your performance video. And of course, thanks a lot to all the speakers and to all the inspiring inputs. And as Hubert said, I think it's always interesting how to connect it to Vienna. For example, if you think about the project of the market hall at Naschmarkt, which is somehow in the media, and then looking at Tel Aviv, and I'm not talking about on lot, I'm not talking about taking that one and putting it into Vienna, but what's interesting about is to look at the existing fabric and to look on all the informal and formal traces of a site before you start planning something, and I think we can learn a lot from that. Have a nice break. We have some great food there from Rita Brinks, and we see each other again about 10 minutes after 6 because we need some time to make some changes here. Thanks a lot.